Welcome to another bar walkthrough video from SuperfastCPA. I'm Logan, and in today's video, we're going to be going over bar area 1. This is section A3. This is an application topic. Describe and use the different costing methods, including absorption, variable, activity-based, process, and job order costing. And we're going to be doing that the SuperfastCPA way, which is diving straight into the questions to learn the material. Now, if you don't know much about our strategies, make sure you go to SuperfastCPA.com and sign up for our free 1-hour webinar training. Again, it is free, it is only 1 hour long, and in that 1 hour, we will teach you the key ingredients to passing the CPA exam so you don't waste months or even years of your time failing exams. And after you watch that, you're going to want to learn more, so make sure you also check out becoming a SuperfastCPA Pro member. Pro members get access to the full versions of these videos. So in today's video, we're only going to be going over 6 questions, but SuperfastCPA Pro members will get access to the full 12-question video when we post it in the member forum. So if you like this and you like our other videos for the other sections as well, make sure you check out becoming a SuperfastCPA Pro member to get access to those full videos. Now with that, let's dive into the questions for this video. All right, here we are at question 1, and as we dive into this first question, there is something I always like to point out when it's available, and that is a good strategy for test day is to read the last sentence of the question first, because very frequently that will give you a good idea or give you context for what you're supposed to be dealing with throughout the question. So if you read the last sentence first, you'll know what to be looking for throughout the rest of the question instead of getting all the way down to the bottom of the question and realizing, oh, this is what I was supposed to be looking for the whole time. So again, this is a very good strategy, especially for test day. It's not something that always works, especially if there's only like one sentence, but again, it's a great habit to be in. So let's do that here. How much overhead would be allocated to the deluxe product under activity-based costing? So again, imagine we were at the exam and you read that last sentence and you immediately know you are dealing with activity-based costing. You immediately know you're dealing with a costing method in this question. That would be so helpful to know right away instead of having to go through the whole question or maybe half the question and then realize that's what you're dealing with. So again, that's why we do that. Let's go up to the top. Ridgeway Tools produces 2 products, Standard and Deluxe. The company incurs $120,000 in total overhead costs. Under traditional absorption costing, overhead is allocated based on direct labor hours. The company records the following. Standard takes 3,000 direct labor hours and Deluxe takes 1,000 direct labor hours. Under activity-based costing, overhead is divided into 2 cost pools. Machine setups, and so it was $60,000 based on the number of setups. And then quality inspections, that's also $60,000, and that's based on the number of inspections. So here's the activity data for the products. So if we were doing this based on activity, Standard takes 10 setups and 20 inspections, and Deluxe takes 30 setups and 40 inspections. So how much overhead would be allocated to the Deluxe product under activity-based costing? So we are seeing that they originally used traditional absorption costing, and we'll learn a little bit about that in the explanation if you don't remember what that is. But they're wanting to switch to activity-based costing, and that's going to be based off of setups and inspections. So based on this information here, you might be able to kind of figure your way out through this and figure out how much overhead is applied to the Deluxe product under activity-based costing. If you have no idea how to do this though, that is okay, because we are using this question and the questions in this video to understand how we're supposed to do this. So if you want to give this a try, pause it. If not though, that's okay. We're going to dive into the explanation right now. All right, here we are at the answer C, $85,000. That's the amount of overhead that's going to be allocated to the Deluxe product if they use activity-based costing. So let's go through this. We're going to learn about activity-based and a little bit about absorption costing as well. Under activity-based costing, or ABC, you might very well see that, overhead is allocated based on the product's use of each activity. So it's based on activities that are used to create the products. So for machine setups, there was a total setups of 10 plus 30 equaling 40. So there's 40 total setups between Deluxe and Standard. Deluxe takes 30 of those setups, so it therefore takes up 75% of the setups. So the setup related overhead is 75% of the overhead when it comes to activity-based costing. So 75% multiplied by 60,000, that's $45,000 of overhead that's going to be applied to Deluxe based on machine setups. Now we do the same thing for quality inspections. Total inspections was 20 for Standard, 40 for Deluxe, so that's 60 total. Again, Deluxe takes 40 of those inspections, so that's 2/3 or 66.67% of the inspections. So that ratio, 66.67 multiplied by the $60,000 for quality inspection overhead is $40,000. So total overhead allocated to Deluxe is $45,000 plus $40,000 equaling $85,000. This example highlights how ABC uses multiple cost drivers, in this case it was setups and inspections, unlike traditional absorption costing, which would allocate all $120,000 based on labor hours alone. ABC provides more accurate product costing when products consume overhead activities differently. So you can see the difference here. Normal, traditional absorption costing, which is very frequently what's used, that one just takes the $120,000 of overhead and applies it based on direct labor hours, and that's it. That's the whole thing. It's not even really an activity, it's just direct labor hours. But with activity-based costing, you're focusing on the activities, the things that are actually happening to make a product, and you might base the overhead off of that. Again, in this situation, setups and quality inspections. So you can see the difference there. Activity-based, again, is based on activities, and you're trying to figure out what proportion of overhead is allocated to each type of activity based on, the percentage of the activities. Whereas absorption costing, again, you just take the whole overhead cost and you split it up based on one driver. So I hope that helped a little bit in understanding the difference between those two. Now let's go to the next question. All right, here we are at question 2. Again, we're going to read the last sentence first. If Jasper produced 5,000 units and sold 4,000 units during the month, what is the total cost of ending inventory using variable costing? Okay, let's go up to the top. We know we're dealing with variable costing this time. Jasper Corp manufactures electronic devices. For the current month, the following per unit cost data applies. Direct materials, $40. Direct labor, $30. Variable manufacturing overhead, $10. Fixed manufacturing overhead, $15. Variable selling and administrative expenses, $5. Fixed selling and administrative expenses, $8. So again, with all those different amounts per unit, what is the variable costing if they have 5,000 units and sold 4,000 units? Now, this one won't be too difficult if you have a little bit of experience with this. If you don't know how to do this, again, that is okay. We are using this question to learn. But if you want to give it a try, pause the video and come back when you're ready. All right, here we are. The answer is A, $80,000. So let's go through this. Under variable costing, so this is different than absorption costing and activity-based costing, only variable manufacturing costs are inventoried. So the direct labors and the direct materials, those go directly into the manufacturing, and those are variable costs. So those go into it. And then variable manufacturing overhead also goes into it. So only the variable costs. So it was $40 plus $30 plus $10 equaling $80 per unit of variable manufacturing costs. Ending inventory is 5,000 produced less 4,000 sold. So 1,000 units are still sitting there in the warehouse or wherever. So 1,000 multiplied by $80 is $80,000. That's how much the ending inventory is based on variable manufacturing or variable costing. Fixed manufacturing overhead and all selling and admin costs are not included in inventory under variable costing. Now, variable costing seems to be a little bit less prevalent. You might not see it as much as the other ones, but of course it's in the blueprint topic, so you still need to know it. But it's fairly straightforward. Just think of the variable costs, and those are the only ones that go into it. Selling and administrative expenses are not something that has anything really to do with the costing methods. Selling and administrative expenses are something that is separate. So again, when it comes to variable costing, you're just focusing on direct materials, direct labor, and maybe the variable manufacturing overhead. Again, pretty simple. Now let's go to the next question. All right, here we are at question 3. What is the cost per equivalent unit for materials under the weighted average method? Okay, let's go up to the top. Stanton Co. uses process costing. Okay, so this is another type of costing method. We've learned about 4 so far. We've learned about absorption costing. We've learned about variable costing. We've learned about activity-based costing, and now we're learning about process costing. Again, using the weighted average method. The following data applies for the current month. Units started, 10,000. Units completed and transferred out, 8,000. Ending work in process, 2,000 units. The materials is at 60% complete, and the conversion costs are at 40% complete. So again, that's the materials costs are 60% complete, conversion costs are 40% complete. And that's talking about these units that are still in the work in process. Costs, beginning inventory, 4,600 materials and $3,000 of conversion costs. And then costs added during the period, $48,400 of materials costs and $27,000 of conversion costs. So again, what is the cost per equivalent unit for materials under the weighted average method? Now, I will say this is by far the most complex question we've seen so far out of the 3. This is one that I definitely did not understand when I was going through the process, and I had to spend some time working on this for sure. So if you have any idea how to do this, that's great. Pause the video and think about this. But if you don't know how to do this, totally understandable. Let's dive into the explanation so that we can start learning about this together, because there's a lot of totally different things than the other costing methods in this question. So let's go ahead and do the answer. All right, here we are. The answer is B, $5.76. That is the cost per equivalent unit for materials if you're using the weighted average method. So again, to be honest, this is one where you just need to remember how you're supposed to do it. You might not fully understand what you're doing during this processing costing or during the weighted average method. But once you understand how to calculate equivalent units and using the percentages, it's really not too complicated. So that's why I just wanted to show it to you simply here. So the first step is we have to calculate the equivalent units based on materials. If you don't know what equivalent units is, again, we're just figuring out how to calculate that here. So you take the units completed, then you take the ending WIP or work in process, and that's 2,000. We multiply that by the materials percentage complete. So not the conversion costs, the material, because it did say specifically material. So 2,000 multiplied by 60% is 1,200. So out of that work in process that was still sitting there, 60% of it was complete, so 1,200. So the equivalent units is the units that have been completed plus the completed portion of the work in process. And so that's 8,000 plus 1,200, 9,200 equivalent units. Now, again, if you don't really understand what that means, it's okay. Focus on knowing how to do this. So equivalent units equals, again, the units completed plus the ending WIP percentage complete. So now we can figure out the total material costs, and then we'll be able to do the equivalent unit cost of materials per unit. So total materials cost is, again, very straightforward. We take the beginning materials, $4,600 of materials, and the costs added for the period, or the additional materials costs for the period, and that's $48,400. So we just add those two together, and that gives us $53,000 of total materials cost. So we take that $53,000, divide it by the equivalent units, and that gives us $5.76, and it's like slightly rounded. I think it was like 5.7608 or something like that. So really $5.76 cost per equivalent unit. And again, you don't really need to, if you want to dive deeper into what equivalent units means, then you can do that on your own. But what I wanted to show you in this question is just how to do it. If you ever see something with the process costing method and you are doing the cost per equivalent unit, there might be other methods you could use besides the weighted average, like maybe FIFO. But in this question, I just wanted to show you how to do it with the weighted average method. And again, you just take the units completed and the ending WIP completed to get the total equivalent units, divided by the total materials cost, and that will give you the cost per equivalent unit. And that is the answer for this. Again, I don't want to dive too much deeper into it other than just showing you how to do it for this question. So that's one part of process costing. Now let's go to the next question. All right, here we are at question 4. What is the amount of overapplied or underapplied overhead for the year? So let's go up to the top. Durant or Durante Products estimates the following for the year. Estimated total fixed overhead, $120,000. Estimated variable overhead rate, $4 per machine hour. Estimated machine hours, 30,000. At year end, the actual results were actual machine hours of 32,000 and actual total overhead incurred $248,000. So again, what is the amount of overapplied or underapplied overhead for the year? Now, if you understand actual and applied overhead, then this question won't be too difficult. But this is something that if you don't know how to do it, you will definitely need to know how to do it when it comes to process costing and sometimes job order costing, usually process costing, but you won't really sometimes see which costing method it is. Just usually those are the ones that it deals with. But you need to know how to do this for sure. So if you have any idea how to do this, go ahead and try it. If not though, again, we're going to go to the answer to start learning how to do it. All right, here we are at the answer C, $8,000 overapplied. So let's go through this. This is a fairly straightforward topic, but again, you need to know how to do this. So we need to learn how to calculate the actual overhead and the applied overhead. So first we take the estimated total overhead. That also might be sometimes called the budgeted overhead. So the fixed estimated overhead was $120,000. The variable was 30,000 machine hours multiplied by $4 per machine hour. And you can see that up above if you want to go back in the video a little bit. $120,000. So 120 plus 120 is $240,000 of estimated overhead or budgeted overhead. Now we can use that to figure out the predetermined rate for overhead, how much they are expecting to apply for overhead per machine hour. So $240,000 of estimated overhead divided by the $30,000 of estimated machine hours, and that gives us $8 per machine hour of overhead. Now we can use that to figure out the applied overhead. So applied overhead was $32,000 multiplied by $8, and that gives us $256,000. And again, that was 32,000 actual machine hours. So actual overhead was $248,000. But the applied overhead, again, using the predetermined rate, is $256,000. So you can see that they applied $256,000 of overhead, but the actual overhead that they needed was $248,000. And we got the actual overhead from right up here, $248,000. So that's the overhead that they actually would have needed, the actual overhead, but they applied $256,000 of overhead because of their predetermined rate from their estimated costs. And again, you figure all that out and then you apply it to the actual machine hours, and that gives you the applied overhead versus the actual overhead. And so they had $8,000 more of applied overhead than they actually needed. So again, this is a very straightforward concept, but it is something you definitely need to know how to do when it comes to costing methods in the bar exam. So if you need to, maybe go back over this question, try to understand the different pieces of it, because you will definitely need to know how to do this. Now with that, let's go to the next question. All right, here we are at question 5. How much overhead should be applied to job number 204? So let's go to the top. Nash Custom Cabinets uses a job order costing system, so that's another costing system that we're learning about, and applies overhead based on direct labor hours. The company's annual estimates are total manufacturing overhead of $240,000, total direct labor hours, 30,000. Job number 204 incurred the following during the period: direct materials, $8,000, direct labor, 120 hours at $25 per hour. So again, how much overhead should be applied to job number 204? So this is job order costing. This is different than the other costing methods we've seen so far. It's fairly straightforward if you just kind of think about the name. It's the costing for a specific job. So if you want, pause the video and kind of take what we've learned from the other costing methods and see if you can figure this out. And when you're ready, you can come back. But if not, let's go ahead and look at the answer together right now. All right, here we are at the answer, D, $960. So again, this one's not too difficult. We just need to understand what job order costing is. So the way that you do job order costing is you first have to figure out the predetermined overhead rate, kind of similar to process costing, $240,000 of total manufacturing overhead that was estimated and divided by the $30,000 of direct labor hours that was estimated. So that's $8 per direct labor hour that they're planning on applying of overhead to each direct labor hour. Step 2 is you take that overhead rate and apply it to job number 204. So 120 labor hours for job 204, multiply that by $8, and that's $960 of overhead applied to that job. This teaches how job order costing tracks direct costs to individual jobs, while overhead is applied using a rate, not actual overhead. It's one of the key distinctions from process costing. So process costing is different from this because, again, in this case, you're applying it just to that specific job and you're just using the overhead rate for that job. So that was just a small intro into job order costing. Now let's go to the next question. All right, here we are at question 6. Using the sales value at split off method, how much of the joint cost should be allocated to product A? Okay, let's go up to the top. Granite Oil Co. refines a single input into two joint products, product A and product B. At the split off point, the company produced 1,800 units of product A, which sells for $50 per unit, 2,400 units of product B, which sells for $25 per unit. The total joint processing cost incurred was $100,000. So using the sales value at split off method, how much of the joint cost should be allocated to product A? So this is one that is not in the blueprint, but it does seem to be something important that you need to know. You need to know how to do the costing method that involves split off costs and figuring that out. So if you don't know how to do this, that's fine. If you want to give it a try, go ahead and do that and pause the video. And when you're ready, come back, we'll look at the answer together. All right, here we are. The answer is A, $60,000. That is the amount that is going to be allocated to product A. So let's go through this. So first we have to figure out the value at split off. So 1,800 of units of product A multiplied by $50 per unit that it's sold for. So $90,000. Product B, 2,400 units multiplied by $25 per unit. That's $60,000. So the total sales is $150,000. Now we can use that to figure out the proportion percentage applied to each product, and then we can apply that to the joint costs. So step 2, we take product A's proportion, and that's $90,000 out of the $150,000, meaning 60%. We take that and multiply it by the $100,000 of total joint costs. So again, it's $100,000 that is applied as a joint cost between the two. There might be other costs, but as far as joint cost, that is how much that is applied between the two. So 60% of the $100,000 of joint cost is $60,000. That's how much of the joint cost is applied to product A. And again, this is one that isn't in the blueprint title, but it is still something that appears to be something that you need to know. So with that, we've learned about multiple different costing methods. And before we do anything else, let's do one more part of the SuperFast CPA process called pillar topics. Now, the idea behind pillar topics is as you're going through the questions to learn the material, you will notice the things that keep popping up. You've seen 2 or 3 or 4 questions trying to teach you about process costing method or about different parts of job order costing. Again, whatever you see in the multiple choice questions, and especially if you see it more frequently, you will know that those are the pillar topics, the key points from the questions that you need to know. So you take some time and write them out in your own words so that you understand them in your own way. And as you're doing this each day, you are building your own personal repository of the most important things you need to know for the exam, again, based off of the questions that you studied from. So let's go ahead and take a look at the pillar topics for this video. All right, here we are at the pillar topics. Let's just dive straight in. First off, let's talk about absorption costing. This is kind of the most common that you might see in your typical day-to-day accounting. Absorption costing assigns all manufacturing costs, fixed and variable, to products. It uses a single overhead rate and is required for external financial reporting. Now let's talk about variable costing. Variable costing includes only variable manufacturing costs in the product cost, treating fixed manufacturing overhead as a period expense. It is used for internal decision-making and contribution margin analysis. So variable costing is less common than absorption costing. And now let's talk about activity-based costing, or ABC. Activity-based costing assigns overhead to products based on the actual activities that drive costs, using multiple cost pools and activity-specific cost drivers. It provides more accurate costing in complex operations with diverse products. So think about what we learned in activity-based costing, where we were comparing the machine setups and the quality inspections. Those were cost drivers that were activities that they used to assign costs to different products and things like that. Now let's talk about process costing. Process costing averages costs over large volumes of identical units produced in a continuous process. It uses equivalent units to assign material and conversion costs to completed and in-process goods. So process costing, we didn't talk too much about what process costing is, but now we're talking about it in the pillar topics. Process costing, again, takes this large volume of identical units and averages the cost across those different units. Now let's talk about job order costing. Job order costing tracks direct materials, direct labor, and applied overhead separately for each custom job or batch. So kind of the opposite of process costing. Process costing is everything's identical. There's just tons of units, so you just split it across all of them. Job order costing is you apply it to each specific job, and each job is going to be different. Overhead is applied using a predetermined rate based on labor or machine hours, typically. Now let's talk about joint product costing. Again, this one's not in the blueprint topic title, but it does seem to be one that you probably need to know. Joint product costing allocates costs incurred before the split-off point to multiple products using methods like sales value at split-off or net realizable value. It is used when one process yields two or more valuable outputs. Now, we talked about multiple different process costing methods in this video, and my focus was I was trying to show you mainly how to do it. I focused less on the definitions of the costing methods and more, again, on the calculations that come behind those different costing methods. So if you understand the calculations, but you still want to understand a little bit more the idea, like the concept behind some of these different costing methods, I would encourage you to, look at your review course or maybe look up the definitions, things like that, because again, I wanted to focus on the calculations in this video. Now, with that, we've gone over everything for the YouTube version of this video. Again, we're only doing 6 questions in today's video, but SuperfastCPA Pro members will get access to the full 12-question version of the video when we post it in the member forum. So they're going to get a little bit more help and a little bit more practice. So if you like this and you like our other videos and the other sections, make sure you check out becoming a SuperfastCPA Pro member to get access to those full videos and other great products as well. And the best way to become a SuperfastCPA Pro member is actually by first going to SuperfastCPA.com and signing up for our free 1-hour webinar training. In that 1 hour, we will teach you the key ingredients to passing the CPA exam so you don't waste months or even years of your time failing exams. And again, it's free, it's only 1 hour, so it's totally worth your time. And after you watch that, that will give you a good path to learning about and becoming a SuperfastCPA Pro member. So check out the webinar, then check out becoming a pro member. I hope this video was helpful. If you did find it helpful and you liked it, make sure to like it and leave a comment in the YouTube video. And with that, I will see you in the next video.